Hi there and welcome back. You're with Terry, and today I'm going to be working on 6 different pines, cleaning them up, plucking needles, removing unwanted growth, and then also wiring them and giving them some shape. If you find the following content helpful, then you can thank me by clicking the thanks button just below the video. First up, we have a Japanese black pine or 2-needle pine, which I've grown from seed, and it is now probably in its 5th or 6th year of development. I forgot to mention earlier on that this work is now being done in the South African autumn, which is the opposite to the Northern Hemisphere and what they would be experiencing at the moment. Before I get stuck into the tree, I first need to clean it up a little bit, and this means I'm going to be removing 3-year-old needles, which are generally going to be the needles that are yellowing and already pretty much falling off the trees. If you only have a normal pair of tweezers, you can use that to remove the needles, but a pair of tweezers designed specifically for use on plucking pine needles is certainly going to be better. There are a couple of reasons for this, and the first is that there is a pronounced section at the front of the tweezers on the pine needle version, which helps to separate the two halves of the tweezers so that the tweezer doesn't close on the needle itself, and when it does do that, it's just tendency to slide off. Once you've removed these old and dying needles, it's easier to see what branches you have to work with. On the screen now, you can see me removing the excess buds that I don't want. This is areas where you have more than the 2 buds that you would like to develop further, and anything extra to that you want to cut and remove. When selecting which buds to keep, it's ideal to try to find buds that are of a roughly equal strength and also better positioned, in other words, opposite one another and laying horizontal on the branch. These trees were developed from seedling cutting, which means that I will have very low down branches on the trunk, and in fact probably too many branches. And what you can see me doing now is eliminating some of these branches which I kept and allowed to develop until I was clearer on which branches I wanted to develop further. I'm using a small knob cutter as they work perfectly for this kind of work in a restricted space. It's okay to reduce some of the needles that you have on the branches which remain, just in an effort to slow them down slightly. Otherwise they will become very coarse, and the intention is for some of this growth to be redirected, stimulating new buds, and I can then create more branches or a denser network of branches. Once finished trimming the branches that I don't want to keep, I can then go in and start wiring the branches which remain. For this wire work, I'm just going to be using aluminium anodized wire. You will notice that I've had to adjust the angles of the wire because the branches are so small on shohin sized material that you don't really have much space in order to put the coils, which is what you need in order to direct the branch or to give it to some shape. Part of the reason for doing the work in autumn is as the needles would by now have hardened off and have become a lot more robust and won't be damaged as easily as they would have earlier in the season if you'd done the work then. You can now see me applying a thinner piece of wire to the terminals of the branches, and this is so that I can direct these candles or these tips up towards the sun, which will strengthen them further. These branches that have now just been removed were growing on the inside of the trunk curve, and I decided that it was best to eliminate them. So after wiring the complete tree and positioning those branches, that brings me to the end of the work that is required at this point in time on this first pine. Another example of a Japanese black pine, which I grew from a seedling cutting on a rock, is about 6 years old at this point. Once again, the first step is just to go through the tree and remove all the old needles from the foliage, and this will make things a lot cleaner. Being quite a vigorous specimen, this tree has multiple shoots at or multiple buds at most of the tips, and so I need to reduce those down to 2. During the development up until this point, I've kept more branches that I needed, but this would allow me to make selections, and so at this point in time I can go in and remove some of these branches which I now know I do not need. As I feel that the trunk is now thick enough as well, I can remove the escape branch. Rather than chop it off right to the base, I'm going to reduce the length of the escape branch tremendously, and then also ring bark it, as this will allow the callus formation to start around that area. I'm now going to apply some aluminium wire to give the branches some movement and bend them into positions that I need them to be. You can see me applying the wire with a lot of caution when I get to these buds, because these buds are very important for the future of this branch, as I want to shorten it tremendously. For now, these buds are too weak for me to be able to cut back to them, but in the future, probably after a season, they will be much stronger, and then I can reduce the length of the branch. And that brings me to the end of the work that I can do on this second pine. This third tree is another of those that I've grown from seedling cutting, and it's been developed in this clay pot for most of the time. In fact, slightly smaller container, and then it was potted up a season or two ago into this larger container that you see it growing in now. The work that's required on this tree, which is now essentially being styled for the very first time, is very much the same as the others. And so it's really just needle plucking to remove the excess needles that I don't want, that are old and dying, and then thinning the buds down to 2. On some of the pines that you see me working on in this video, you will see that there's evidence of wire bite. And this is as a result of the technique that I use to rapidly fatten up the trunks using wire, cage wiring technique, which is where you intentionally allow the wire to bite in quite extremely, and this causes the bark to fatten up, the tree to fatten up around the wire. I have got a video dealing specifically with that technique, and I would encourage you to watch that, as I think it's quite a crucial technique for developing good or high quality shohin Japanese black pine material. You will notice that I'm positioning the lowest branches in a very downward angle, and then as I move up into the apical area, the branch angle changes to a more vertical fashion. This tree is a good example of growing shohin material from seed, which allows you the opportunity to give really exaggerated curves to the material at a very young age. This back budding is as a result of the strength of the tree and then cutting the branches earlier in the season, probably in midsummer, and this then produced these new buds which you can see on the tree. The fact that I also grow all of my pines from seedling cuttings means that I will always have the opportunity of getting or producing buds very low down on the trunk, which is very useful when creating shohin pines. Once again, I have a branch which I would really like to keep, and fortunately it does have some buds on it, and these will be cut back to when they are strong enough. Of course, if you have leggy branches on your pines and you're unable to produce back budding, then the easiest treatment is going to be, or solution is going to be, to graft, but that is something that you need to do in spring and definitely not in autumn. This Japanese black pine has been grown in the rock for only 2 years now. The tree itself is probably about 5 years old and was grown specifically by myself for the intention, or with the intention, to place it onto a rock. With this tree, I decided to remove the escape branch entirely, and I'm reducing the stub that remains using a knob cutter. I'm now going to apply some Japanese sealer. This putty type sealer is available in 2 versions. The one that you want to use on all conifers has a green lid, as it has an added hormone which accelerates the callus formation. The plain white lid is ideal for use on deciduous trees. If you found that content helpful and you'd like to thank me for it, please do so now by clicking the thanks button just below the video. This last tree, another root over rock, is a little bit of an older tree, probably 2 years older than the previous one, also grown by myself from a seedling cutting. You can see here the scar that resulted from the first escape branch that I removed last year, and the extent of the callus formation thanks to the putty, the green lidded putty that I just mentioned for the first tree. You'll notice that to the left of the scar there is a new escape branch which I've allowed to develop, and this is also contributing largely to the callus formation, or the extent of the formation, as I transitioned away from that initial escape branch into this new one, which is the new line for the trunk. When you're trying to put bends into branches on shohin trees, it's sometimes very useful to use a ginning pliers and then to bend the wire itself that is wrapped around the branch, rather than trying to use your fingers to bend the branch. And this gives you a much more compact or tighter and exaggerated bend. And that brings me to the end of the work that's required on this tree for this season. It's also all that I have to show you this time. Thank you for watching the video. I hope that you've enjoyed it and that you've picked up a few tips for growing your own black pines. If you haven't done so yet, please do like and subscribe to my channel. I do release videos every second Friday. I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take care and goodbye.